In this lecture, we will see how to prepare Audacity for interview podcast editing. Interview podcasts require special settings for smooth editing. Let's assume you have done the interview and got the audio files. I have two WAV files here that I got from Russell Hogg. Russell Hogg hosts his podcasts on Buzzsprout. More about that later. Once your interview files are ready, you take those files into Audacity for editing. This is more than an hour-long interview. I got two separate tracks for the host and the guest, and they are perfectly synced. This synchronization is very important for interview podcasts. If you delete something from one track or move one track, other tracks will be out of sync. It does not matter if you have a total of 2 tracks or 3 tracks or more. You must have to sync lock these tracks. You can see the Sync Lock Tracks option in the Tracks menu. It is a global setting and currently, it is off as no tick mark beside it. Click to turn this on. The sync lock is now active, and you can see the lock icon on each track. I cannot stretch this enough, the sync lock has to be on for interview podcasts. You should not turn it off unless absolutely necessary during podcast editing. If I select something in one track, the lock icons will appear on other tracks, meaning it is locked. While the sync lock is active, both tracks will move at the same time. It is very important, otherwise the speaking will become out of sync. Let me show you what I mean by turning off the sync lock. I will go to Tracks and click on Sync Lock Tracks. The lock is now off, and I can move the tracks individually. You may need this individual moving of a track while you add intro and outro music. But that can be achieved while the sync lock is on. I will show that later. I will adjust the tracks and zoom in to see the waveform better. The beginning part of the interview is that they are talking to each other. They are discussing what they will include in the podcast and such. So obviously this part will not go into the podcast and need to be deleted. Without a sync lock, this deletion will cause a problem. At this point the host stopped talking and the guest started. Observe what happens when I delete the selected part. You can see it has become out of sync as I deleted that part. I will show it again. Perfectly synced. I delete, and the synchronization is gone. I will undo it by Command Z, or Control Z if you are using Windows. You now may argue that if I had selected both tracks, it would not become out of synchronization. I have now selected both tracks and delete them. It is now perfectly synced. But I have to always remember to select both tracks for deletion. A slight dragging will make everything out of sync. I hope you got the point why sync lock is very important for interview podcast editing. I will turn on the sync lock and will not turn it off unless I am forced to do so. Let's assume I have started removing the unnecessary parts from the podcast. Sync lock will cause a problem in a scenario. I may need to delete some parts from one track, but not from another track. I am removing some unwanted parts from the bottom track, but it is also deleting important talks from the top track. The solution is simple. You will just make those parts silent. There is a silence audio selection button on the toolbar that will make that part silent. If you do not want to make those parts dead silent in this way, there is another alternative to replace this with a room tone. I will discuss those in another lecture. You should now sync lock your tracks and practice. If you are already familiar with sync lock, move to the next lecture. If you like this tutorial, you can enroll in the podcast editing course. You can edit your interview podcast to the level like magic mastering in Buzzsprout. Link will be in the description.